But we've come down to Hebrews. Oh, let's see. Yeah. Did we start Hebrews 11 last week?
We did.
Okay, I thought we got down to verse 12. So he's already mentioned numerous people, Abraham, Sarah, and we're going to just continue on today where we left off last time. These ones that he's already talked about, he says, now these all died in faith, not having received the promises. God had promised, starting with, well, there were promises all the way back to Adam and Eve, but with Abraham, he made the promise that through his seed, all nations would be blessed. And when they died, that hadn't happened yet. I mean, their families had grown big, but certainly weren't the size of the sand of the sea and all that God had promised. And certainly all nations weren't being blessed yet through his seed, because Jesus wasn't about to come for 2,000 more years after Abraham. So these all died in faith. They were just trusting in what God had said. They hadn't received the promises yet, but having seen them afar off, were assured of them. So they, through the eye of faith, they could see them down the road. And like us, we're not looking forward to the coming of the Messiah like they were, but we, through the eye of faith, are looking for that home in heaven, the dwelling place of God, and where Jesus is sitting at the right hand and he's interceding for us. Through the eye of faith, we can see that and we can picture that, and that's what gives us the strength and hope to carry on with our lives. And that's what gave them the strength and hope to carry on with their lives, trusting in God and serving God. But it was all in faith. They hadn't seen it yet, but they saw them afar off. They were assured of them, assured of these promises, and they embraced them, embraced the promises. Yes, God said it's going to happen. It's going to happen. And they confessed that they were strangers and pilgrims on the earth. Now, in 1 Peter chapter 1 and in chapter 2, verse 11, it talks about Christians being strangers and pilgrims walking on the earth. So what is a stranger and a pilgrim? Okay. Yeah, foreigner, somebody that's living someplace that's not their home. That's what those are. These guys were not they're not where they called home. There's some where God told them to go. And it's just like me. I was born and raised in Arizona, so that's kind of always, if I say back home, that's what I mean. And even though I live here, perfectly happy living here and all that, there's a home, my original home somewhere, and we all have that. Well, they had their home. Abraham had been born over in the Ur of the Chaldees, lived in Haran, over east, like in Iran or Iraq, and God had told him to pack up and leave and go to a place that I'll prepare for you. So they went to the land of Canaan, but they didn't belong there. They were just sojourners. They just were dwelling there, living in tents, tending their sheep and all that. But they were okay, because that's where God said to do, and that's where these promises were going to be fulfilled. And so through the eye of faith, they just accepted it and lived there. And he says in verse 14, here's what I'm talking about. Those who say such things declare plainly that they seek a homeland. We're not home. It's what they were saying in their minds. We belong somewhere else, and we're looking for something better than that. He says they're seeking a homeland, and he says, truly, if this condition, if this was true, if they had called to mind the country from which they had come out, if they thought, man, I really, really wish I could go back to Haran. if they had called to mind that country from which they came out, they would have had opportunity to return. They could have gone back. Nobody was stopping them. But because of their faith, they stayed where God wanted them to be. And they didn't return. And that's what he talks about next. I think I went to okay.
16.
Okay, so now this is where we need. They didn't go back home, but now this is that. But there, that's a contrast. Instead of going back, wanting to go back home, what they want to do, in contrast to wanting to go back home, is, but now they desire a better place. Now, the now there doesn't mean now time-wise. As far as even for them, it wasn't now. The Hebrews were 2,000 years after Abraham. The now is the way we use it sometimes, in the sense of, like it says up there in the blue, but note, or as the matter now stands, here's how the situation is. They desire a better place. Better is a comparison word. Better than what? Better than what they had, which was what? Living as a sojourner and pilgrim in a land that wasn't home to them. But they stayed there because they were looking for something better. That is a heavenly country. Their eyes were spiritual. They were looking beyond this life to another better life. And so he comes to the conclusion, therefore, since these people were in the eye of faith, living their lives and looking forward to a better country, because of that, God is not ashamed to be called their God. And here's why he's not ashamed to be called their God, because he has prepared a city for them. So can you imagine these people? I'm looking for that place. God's gonna make it for me. And if God said, wait a minute, I didn't make anything. They're looking at me and trusting in me, and I haven't gotten anything ready. You think he would be ashamed if that was the case? Yeah, he would be. Because he had promised and they were looking forward to it, but then he didn't do it. He'd have reason to be ashamed, but he's not ashamed to be called their God, because he's done what he said he was going to do. He had prepared a city for them. And so he just interjects this in the middle of the Faith Hall of Fame, what I call it. Most people, a lot of guys call it the Hall of Fame of Faith or whatever. And so he interjects this part. They're looking forward to it through the eye of faith, and God's not ashamed to be called their God, because he's made that place. Now he gets back to the Hall of Fame, again mentioning Abraham. And if you've been noticing, he's already said by faith about 3 times already. Now he says it another time. By faith, Abraham, when he was tested, offered up Isaac. He who had received the promises offered up his only begotten son. Now, it says he who had received the promises. What promises had he received? Abraham.
Well,
Property, a people, a family, and ultimately through his seed, all nations would be blessed. Now, who was that? Who was that promise supposed to go through? Who did God promise it would be? Through Isaac. And so he who had received the promises, God promised me that through Isaac this would happen. Now he's offering up his only begotten son, who is Isaac.
I think it's interesting where it says when he was tested. People always say God won't test you. Here it's clear that God can test you if he wants.
Yes. Yeah.
I think people can, not pass that test a lot of times.
Right. Yeah. I mean, fortunately, none of us are asked to do what Abraham was asked to do, but that just puts a exclamation point on the kind of faith that Abraham had to do what he said. But we're going to see why and how that all worked. Would you do that if God said, through your child, I'm going to bless all nations. Now kill the child. Wouldn't you? Wait a minute, something's wrong here. We would buck and do all kind of other stuff, try to get out of that.
God talked to Abraham in other ways, like telling him to leave, and to go up to Ur of the
Yeah,
Chaldeans.
God had been communicating directly with Abraham.
So, me, it's not hugely, but Abraham would believe.
Okay, well,
God believe him.
well, and we're gonna see what was in Abraham's mind. Gene, did you have something?
The beginning of also, yes, God didn't require Abraham to offer his son, but God did offer his son.
Yeah, yeah. I mean, all of these are shadows of things to come. This is all types, and the antitypes will come down the road a piece. But we're seeing the types happening here. Barb, did you have a?
There, Abraham offered up Isaac, so in God's eyes, he did offer his son up. It's just that God stopped him.
Right. Yeah, yeah. I mean, he had every intention of, he had the knife raised, he was ready to do it. And God stopped him. But Abraham did it by faith. He just trusted him. Okay, God, but let's let him explain what was in his mind. He offered up his son, of whom it had been said, in Isaac your seed shall be called. I mean, God said it's going to be through Isaac, but now kill Isaac. You know, even though he said that, here's what Abraham concluded in verse 19. He concluded that God was able to raise him up even from the dead, from which he also received him. And the next phrase is in the figurative sense. So Abraham, when God said, now, through your seed, through Isaac, I'm going to bring all these promises to come to pass. Now, I want you to take him up there and I want you to sacrifice Isaac. Well, like I said, we could have bucked and think, how can I be? How can the promises come through Isaac if I kill him? But no, what in his mind was, well, if God said it, God's powerful enough, he can raise him from the dead. Had Abraham ever seen anybody raised from the dead? Yeah, no. Like you say, not that we know of. If it had happened, I'm sure it had been recorded for us, but he'd never seen it. And yet he knew if God can create the heavens and the earth, he can certainly bring somebody back from the dead. If he tells me to kill him, and he's already promised that through him, all these things would happen, what's the only way that could happen? Is if God raised him from the dead, and God's able to do it. So if he said it, I'll do it. Is that faith? Yeah, I mean, that's a permanent thing. If you plunge a knife into the heart of your own son, and then God is not able to do it or doesn't choose to do it, where would that leave you? I trusted in this guy, and he didn't even do it, or wasn't able to do it. No, he's gonna do. If he says he's gonna do it, he's gonna do it. And that's the by faith part. By faith, Abraham did this because he said, well, if God said it, he can do whatever it takes to bring it about. If it means raising him from the dead, he'll do it. It's interesting where it says here, he was raised from the dead in a figurative sense. Figuratively, in Abraham's mind, Isaac was a dead person. He was ready to kill him, and but God spared him. So the word figurative there is parabole in Greek. What does that sound like in English? Parable. So this is like in a parable, a story that illustrates something. That's what this is. This is an account of something that illustrates something. Isaac hadn't died, but he was as good as dead. because of the faith of Abraham. The only thing that stopped it was God stopped it from happening. Pardon?
I said, I think there's a distinction that should be added there. In faith there, it was a working faith. They actually, it wasn't, oh, I believe and he's got the life. He lived it.
Yeah,
He started.
yeah, he was in the process of,
Everything that you see with faith there, it was that they followed through. It was a working faith, not just, oh, I believe.
right.
I believe the person behind me is gonna catch me like they say they're going to, but unless I fall back. It's not a working faith. It's not.
Yeah. Yeah, it's like you're talking about a trust fall. I get a couple of you guys can come up here and you're gonna catch me, right? And you say yes, and so I go like this and I fall back. Well, if I just stood there and said, yeah, I trust you, but I'm not gonna do that. Well, how much faith do you think you would think I had in you? I trust you, but I'm not gonna do it.
Word be faith, but we don't see that in there because we don't specifically the word working faith. Faith every time I think is used in the Bible, it is that exact, that there is that faith that you actually continue through with it, because you believe.
Right.
You know,
Yeah, I mean, and this whole chapter is an illustration of what real Bible faith is. By faith, they did this. By faith, they did this. By faith, they did this. They didn't just say, yeah, I believe, and then go on their merry way. So we have Abraham, probably the biggest classic example of faith in the whole Bible. Nobody else was asked to do what he was asked to do. And it just seeming in contradiction to everything that he had known. God had said, it's not right to kill, to murder. I mean, learn that back in the case of Cain, way back at the very beginning. And yet God's telling me to do that. It just doesn't make any sense. But he did it anyway because he believed God. Fortunately, we're not asked to do that. So anyway, then the next in verse 20 says, by faith, Isaac was the son of Abraham. Isaac was the guy that was laying on that stone place. And he saw the knife raised up, ready to plunge into his heart. And he was accepting of it. Well, if that's what God wants, so be it. He's the one that happened. By the way, before I go any further, do you know where that happened? Where Abraham built that thing and raised the knife? It was on the stone where the temple was built later, 1,000 years later. And isn't that incredible? He had gone to that same exact place, and that's where he was going to sacrifice.
That's
Well, the cornerstone of the temple itself is built around this big stone. It wasn't really the cornerstone, but nonetheless, it was at the heart of the temple was this stone. And then later on, that's where the temple is built. And it's just incredible. Well, it's not incredible because it's God doing it. It just shows God's providence, how he worked, and how that just was a special place in God's mind. That's where he had picked out to have all these things happen, and he just worked it out over the centuries for these things to happen. Okay, so anyway, by faith, Isaac blessed Jacob and Esau concerning things to come. I debated when I was thinking about this class. Some of you don't know this history of Isaac, Jacob, Esau, all that. But I thought if I take the time to explain it all, exactly what happened, this class would be a much longer time getting over. So for those of you that don't know the stories, what I suggest strongly, if you have a computer, AI is incredible these days. If you just type in, tell me the story of Jacob in the Old Testament, it'll just lay it out for you in just plain, simple English. And you can learn all about it, and it'll tell you where the scriptures are, if to go read them yourself and just learn these. But Jacob and Esau were Isaac's sons, and Jacob actually was the younger son. He shouldn't have got the inheritance. It should have been Isaac, but Isaac sold his inheritance to Jacob for some food. He you know, a thing of porridge, and that's just an illustration of how it's easy for us to give up something super valuable for just a little bit in this life. It's a shadow of life to come. You know, we can live our lives, you know, and just trying to gather all the things that we can get in this life and everything, just forget about God. But what are we doing? We're selling a home in heaven for something that can't last. It's just, yeah, yeah. And so it'll, you think how ridiculous it was for Isaac to do that. Well, take a look at yourself in the mirror. You know, if you're living for this life, you're doing the same thing. You know, you're no brainier than he was. And so, but it was by faith that Isaac blessed Jacob and Esau. He changed things around. It should have been the other way around as far as the blessing goes. He did it because that's what God was directing him to do. And then in verse 21, by faith, Jacob, when he was dying, blessed each of the sons of Joseph and worshiped leaning on the top of his staff. Where was Jacob when he was dying? He was in Egypt. Joseph had gone down there and all that, and brought the family down. And Jacob, when he died, he blessed everybody. And it says that he made mention of the departure of the children of Israel and gave instructions concerning his bones. He says, guys, I'm dying. He was in a family of 75 people that came out of Israel into Egypt because of the famine. And then that began their 400-year stay in Egypt. And but he says, look, the promise is that land up there where we were, that's where the promises is going to be fulfilled. And he was talking about that, and he says, you know, I want you to take my bones and take me back to actually the cave of Machpelah, which is where Abraham and Sarah were already buried there. And then also Jacob's wife, Leah, was buried there already. And so he said, I want you to take me back there. And so Joseph got permission to take the bones back. And there was a huge entourage of people. All the governors and the Pharaoh and everybody went with Abraham up to have this huge funeral. I mean, a funeral of, it'd be like when the king of England dies, you know, people from all over the world come for that. And so that was a big deal. But anyway, it was because Jacob says, I know things are going to be happening. I want to be buried there with my fathers. Did that by faith. And then he says, by faith, Joseph, when he was dying, Joseph died, 50 years or so later after Jacob had died. But now when he's dying, he made mention of the departure of the children of Israel and gave instructions concerning his bones. I think I got a little ahead of myself. Jacob also requested to go back, but that's not what's recorded here in Hebrews. Joseph did that later, and he says, the time's going to come, folks, you know, we're here in Egypt, but the time's going to come when we're all going to go back. Our people are going to go back to the land. And when that happens, I want you to take my bones and bury them there as well. That didn't happen for 400 years. When the children of Israel came out of the land, they had the bones of Joseph with them when they left and ended up they ended up burying him in the same cave, the same place where his forefathers was buried. But it was by faith. We're down here, there's no reason to assume that they were ever going to go back. They had a choice place that Pharaoh had given them, and everything was looking really good for them. Why would we ever want to go back there? But Joseph said, the time's going to come. You're going to go back. Take me with you when you go. So, and that was by faith. God said it was going to be up there. It's going to be up there whenever it happens. So then, in verse 23, by faith, Moses, when he was born, was hidden 3 months by his parents. Now, whose faith are we talking about? Moses's? No, his parents. It looks like he's going to be talking about Moses. By faith, Moses. No, Moses didn't do this. His parents did. But it was when he was born, his family, his parents trusted God, and they hid him for 3 months. Why did they hide him? Okay, Pharaoh, by the time Moses was born, been 400 years, and what had happened to these people that had come down out of Israel? They had grown and grown and grown to where it started out with 75 people, and now it's a million or more people. And these people are being blessed by God. Obviously, they're being blessed. Now, what is going to come to the Pharaoh's mind? If they get big enough, what's going to happen? They're going to take over. So he put them under bondage and caused them to be slaves and all that kind of stuff to keep them under their thumb. And then he was even more worried. And so he says, we'll kill all the male children. And so his parents said, well, we don't want that to happen to our little baby. So they put him in a little basket and put him in the bulrushes in the Nile River. And along comes Pharaoh's daughter and adopts him as her own child, brings him up, raises him up. But it was by faith. These guys trusted God's going to protect this little guy. And so it was dangerous to put him in the bulrushes. What lives in the River Nile? In the bulrushes? Crocodiles live there. So you put a little baby in there, that's putting some trust that God will take care of him. Anyway, he was hidden 3 months by his parents because they saw that he was a beautiful child, and they were not afraid of the king's command. God will protect this guy, and that was by faith. Now, by faith, Moses, now we're talking about Moses, when he became of age, he refused to be called the son of Pharaoh's daughter, choosing rather to suffer the affliction with his people the people of God, rather than to enjoy the passing of pleasures of sin. Before we go to the next slide, he refused to be called the son of the Pharaoh's daughter. We've talked about that before. Do you remember who my conclusion is that was Pharaoh's daughter? Hatshepsut, who is one of the most powerful. Well, she was one of only 2 women that were ever called Pharaoh, and she may be the only one at all. And she built a ton of the stuff that's in the Valley of the Kings in Egypt. Right now, you can go there and see the stuff that she had built. She was blessed incredibly. She was one of the most powerful leaders ever in Egypt. And why do you think she was so blessed? She had taken Moses in and taken care of God's little child, Moses, that he was going to have lead his children into the land of promise. And that's why I think it was Hatshepsut, because she was so blessed, and she was right in the same time frame. So anyway, but even though he was a son of Pharaoh, he could have had anything he wanted. But instead he chose by faith I want to be with God's people. And so he did that rather than enjoy the pleasures of sin. And Barb,
Interesting. You didn't mention there was that when they took him out of the river, they got his mother to come and care for him.
yeah,
So, he was brought up essentially with his mother.
right. Yeah, and that's a lesson in providence, a whole nother lesson in providence, how God takes care of things. So this little guy, even though he was raised in Pharaoh's household, he had somebody tell him in his little ear all about God and all about the promises and all of that. So he knew that there, yeah,
You're not really, you're part of my.
yeah, and God has promised that through us, all these things are going to happen. And he trusted, he believed it. And by faith, he said, all right, I'm gonna not be part of, even though I'm giving up all this gold and, anything he wanted. I want to be with the God who's made these promises, and I believe that that's what's going to happen. So I want to be a part of that. And what he did in verse 26, it says, esteeming the reproach of Christ greater riches than the treasures in Egypt. It's interesting. He mentions Christ. What does the word Christ mean? Anointed, the anointed one, the Messiah. So already even before Moses and the Bible was starting to be written, they knew there was going to be a Messiah, a Savior that was going to come. He was going to be the seed of Abraham, through which all nations would be blessed. And even though people are going to look down on me because I believe in that future promise, that there's going to be a Messiah, I'd rather have that than the next thing it says here, than the treasures of Egypt. And we've all seen some of the treasures of Egypt, haven't we? Those, Tutankhamun's tomb, when was it discovered? 1800s, or no, maybe even later. Anyway, no earlier than the 1800s. Guess where that tomb was, completely sealed and safe during Moses's time? Well, during Moses' time, it wasn't there yet. Tutankhamun came about 3 generations later. But in just 100 years, Tutankhamun would live and die, have all those riches. That's the kind of riches we're talking about, all that wonderful gold and everything that they found in some of the tombs. That's what he was giving up, because he trusted in God that there's going to be these promises, and he wanted to have that instead. All right, so then verse 27, by faith, he forsook Egypt. Just set it behind him, not fearing the wrath of the king. Well, why do you think he didn't fear the wrath of the king? He trusted God. God says, you go, I'll trust him, and I'll do what he says. I'm not afraid of the king. And here's why. He endured as seeing him who is invisible. It was like through the eye of faith, he knew there was God. He had seen the burning bush. He hadn't seen God. God had told him to take off his shoes. You're on holy ground, but he didn't see God, but he knew who was talking to him. And by faith, he could see this one who is invisible to our eyes. And then it says, by faith, he kept the Passover and the sprinkling of blood, lest he who destroyed the firstborn should touch them. So the same one who destroyed the firstborn, it was God. That was the 10th plague, the one that got them actually released out of Egypt. And he knew if God can do that to those, he could do it to us. We better do what he says. So when God said, keep the Passover, what did Moses say? We're keeping the Passover. And he says, sprinkle the blood, we'll sprinkle the blood, because we don't want God to touch us the same way he touched the Egyptians. And it says in verse 29, by faith, they passed through the Red Sea as by dry land. Had they ever seen anything like that happen, the parting of the sea? According to something I just read this week, if they think they found the place where they crossed, if they're right, it was about 300 feet deep of water. So you're having a football field, stack of water on both sides of you, and you're going to go across there like 6 or 7 miles. I forget how far it was. Yeah, I mean,
How can that happen? That has to be miraculous.
that takes faith to go through that. I don't care who, you got the Egyptians coming up on you that are going to destroy you, or at least take you back to bondage. So we're going. God says, go, we'll go. They did that by faith. Whereas the Egyptians, did they have faith? No, God hadn't told them to do it, and they didn't trust him anyway. They attempted to do so, and what happened to them? They were drowned. The water completely engulfed the entire army of Pharaoh and drowned them all. And people have been saying for, a couple decades now, that there's chariots and bones of horses and people at the bottom of the Red Sea at this one particular place in the Gulf of Aqaba. And if they're right, that's exactly where it happened. But I want to believe it myself. They show pictures of chariot wheels and bones of horses and stuff where they've dived down to them. If they're actually correct in it, it'll just be another verification that what God had written down was the truth, and another proof of the Bible. But anyway, the Hebrew writer's point is that faith got them through that Red Sea, but it also, lack of faith killed the Egyptians, and they were drowned in it. Well, it's just about time for us to end, so I'm going to stop, because it goes on next to the next phase of history, the land, entering into the land of Canaan, and what happened with them by faith. Any questions or comments?
They're finding more and more things that prove that the Bible is true. They find little writings, they think they found bones of these horses and chariots. And, probably in the last 20 years, they found, they dig things up and they're finding more and more evidence all the time. I just wonder if God's getting, sending these people to these places, just a thought. As he's getting ready to come back, giving him a chance to believe.
Well, God's been trying all different kind of ways, all down through history. But yeah, I mean,
It's just a thought.
yeah, and it's on us. We are God's mouth and hands and feet here on this earth. And when we see these things coming up, we need to be pointing it out to people. Look what they just found. Proves here in the Bible. Here it says it right here. It was written down 3,000 years ago, and now we just come to find out that it really is true for sure. And we need to be taking advantage of that. That's all I want to say is the evidences that are in the Bible and archaeology and things they're discovering about the human body, and just about the shape of the earth being spherical. all those things God said a long time ago. And we need to be learning it for ourselves to be able to help other people come to faith like you're talking about. So any other questions, comments? If not, thank you guys for your attention, and we'll be back to worship at 11 o'clock.